Patrick, thanks for coming on, man. I've been excited to chat with you for a host of different reasons. I think the club that you run is pretty fascinating. I have a pretty extensive background with both YMCA and Boys and Girls Club, doing trainings for them and growing up a club kid and working there when I was a kid. And so I'm pretty connected to those organizations. So I've been excited to chat with you in general about it. But you're also really passionate about youth sports in general. And I've seen some of your posts about it, and I just thought maybe we'd pick up the thread there. What is it? What role do you think youth sports plays in our communities, our society? How does it fit?
I mean, I'll say for myself personally, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have youth sports as a foundational place to grow and learn. I moved around a lot as a kid, and kind of youth sports or community-based sports was where I made friends and acclimated and became part of a community. And I think that in our world today, we're so fragmented that sports is one of those things that really does unite us, and community-based sports is one of those things that really does bring people together. And I think it's just critically important that if we're doing anything right now, we should be investing into these types of opportunities to bring youth and families together through a shared passion for sport and competition.
How do you see it? So we both lived through it, right? We grew up to your point. I moved a lot as a kid as well. Sports were always the place where if you could hang on the basketball court, you could make friends. And even if you couldn't hang that much, but you could at least participate in it, you could probably blend in enough to connect with people and develop friendships. And that's where most of I think most young men, especially, friendships stem from. Maybe young women as well. What role do you see it playing outside of the individual, maybe more at a societal level?
Oh, that's heavy. There's a great quote that again it just talks about sports, and I can't remember right now. I used to have it in my email signature by God, I'm drawing the blank. I'm so bad at this. The recall, but essentially the theme was that sports unites us. Like it is, the rules of the game. Everybody, whatever you're playing, there's rules that are set aside that everybody agrees to play when they're playing them, and it helps us, govern the game. But those are, I think, skills that as we get older, that's how we learn how to work in a boardroom or work in
Mm.
an office, and so. Yeah, I think that the role that sport plays is just it really just teaches us how to be human, how to be connected, how to work in different teams and environments. Like there's just I don't know. There's so many parallels to um, like life, society. I'm a big analogy person, so like I'm always thinking of sports analogies for like almost every situation. I had a big career transition a while back, and I said, I was like, I compared it to soccer. It's like sometimes you have to pass the ball backwards to move the ball up the field forwards, right? And it's like, so to me, everything you can tie back to something you can learn or connect to on a playing field or on a court in sports. I thought about writing a parenting book on like how sports would align to like parenting, and like you play these different roles. Sometimes you're the coach, sometimes you're the owner and financer, sometimes you're and what makes a good owner is probably what makes a good parent in that phase of their life. Like don't be Jerry Jones and be in the weeds and try to get everybody to do everything. It's like, no, you're the financer. Like, just let them go do the thing. Um, Sorry, Cowboys fans.
Yeah, bummer. Tough for them. That would be a cool book. Like, what are some of the other parallels you see parenting to youth sports or sports in general?
Right. Yeah. So again, sometimes there are phases in your life where your parents are like a player on the field as well. So like you're playing around them. So like again, being a supportive teammate, where you're really just passing the ball to them and letting them run with it and cheering them on. And sometimes they pass it back to you. And I think again, sometimes you're a coach where your role is really to be there to guide and provide structure. So and again, depending on where are at, like there's different phases of life where kids need more structure, they need more cheerleading, they need more they need more money to go do the things that pursue and be happy, and sometimes they need a referee, right? I think as a parent I play referee a lot right now, between my kids, so a good referee makes both sides a little unhappy sometimes, and but keeps it fair for both sides. So
Yeah, I could see that concept really working. I had an experience recently. I have two little girls; they're 6 and 9 right now, and I've coached youth sports most of my life. grew up coaching my siblings' teams, and then I ran youth sports programs for the Parks and Rec, ran basketball programs, and I've always worked in that space. Was a snowboard instructor for kids, like all sorts of things like that. But that was a while back. I've kind of taken the last decade or so off of that until my daughters came of age where I could coach their teams. And my oldest, when I coached her soccer teams, it was all girls. It was all girls. So that was a bit of a learning curve, but it was fun. But this last year, I coached my youngest's team, and it was co-ed. And I only have girls. I have no exposure to what little boys are like, especially when they're together. And I was a little boy, but you don't remember it this way when you're, an adult now. And I got to tell you, man, it was alarming to me to step into that role of the coach of these boys who wouldn't stop tackling each other and touching each other and pushing and prodding and smacking the ball out of each other's hands. And it drove me nuts. My initial reaction was like frustration and anger. And then I had to realize, wait, hold on. That's why they're here. Like this type of practice, right? Forced physical discipline in pursuit of a common goal with a shared rule set with other people. This is the best proxy for them to grow up in. It's the place where we all learned not to foul. And if you did, there were consequences, and you can foul out and the other team will win. And like, it is the arena by which these young boys who are driving me nuts are going to grow into young men who drive people less nuts. It's the vehicle for that. And so I had to really reframe and kind of, it was a culture shock thing. And I had to work through some things to be like, oh my gosh, I'm frustrated with their parents because I would never let my kids behave this way. Of course, all of that is like ignorant. I don't have little boys. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
I have 3 boys and 1 girl. And I will tell you, it's like, it's like, man, if I can keep the kids in the lines or, we actually, I'll tell you, I'll get off track a little bit. We put a ninja gym in our AYC, in the building here. And it used to be this room called bounce houses, and people keep asking me, why and I was like, literally the inspiration was my kids kept climbing the walls in my house. And I was like, we need to find ways for kids to just get more energy out that's going to engage them longer. And, in the bounce houses, they were just like busting heads on each other. Like they were trying to tackle each other. This is a little more structured and it's skill building. But yeah, this idea of like, raising 3 boys and they're not, oldest is 10 now. But yeah, literally climbing the walls, and they're still doing it. But now they know how to actually scale a wall in my house. So cool. Like between the door frames and like, look what I can do. But yeah, it's like they, my daughter's the youngest, and she's, I don't know what that's fully like. So I'm a few years behind you with raising girls. But it's interesting. She has very different interests, and like she picks out her outfit every day, and it's like that's really important to her. She has she came out of the womb with style. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, it's been so interesting remembering that that's the point of most of this, right? My oldest does gymnastics, and she's about to compete for team. She's 9 years old, but she has to like try out to make this gymnastics team. And if they do, they go to these tournaments, and it's been interesting as a parent learning about the investment level required of time and resources to do that as well. But it really is kind of this galvanizing force in most kids' lives, not all, but most kids' lives, some exposure to a physical activity with a shared set of rules where we are trying to beat or win the game, whatever that might be. Are some sports, like you have climbed the ladder at the club there, you've seen this through all different levels. Are there some sports that you find do a better job than others of playing that role of developmental tool and maturation vehicle, or are some inherently better than others? I suspect they're all good, but do some stand out as like really good at that?
So I think I'll generically answer that. Whenever somebody asks me like what the best thing to do to get fit or get active is, it's like, it's whatever the one that you're interested in doing and pursuing is the one that I suggest is the best. And I think with youth, like there's really not one that I would say is better. There's some models that I like better as far as like development. But really, like I'm a true believer that kids need a really wide early sampling. Like they should try everything. Like they really, because they don't really know what they're going to excel at or what they're going to really enjoy doing. And the competition is not other sports. The competition is the couch. The competition is the TV. So try them all, find out what you love, and don't get overly focused on one, because that passion kids' passions wean from year to year, and friend group to friend group. So let them experience it all. But I think that like there's some models that I really there's some institutional structure that's hard to kind of break. So for one, I'll give you an example of one that I like and one that I don't like. I really enjoy how baseball is structured from a rec to travel perspective in like a Cal Rookin or Little League structure, because the way that works is that all the kids, they start the season when the snow melts here in the Northeast anyway, and so they all start the season together, and they join a rec team. They're joining their local team, and they go through their local league play, and then at the end of the season, the kids that want a little bit more, that have a passion and interest and probably some more developed skills, can try out for the all-star team, and that season goes a little bit longer. But it starts with every kid has the opportunity to get on the field and play together.
Yeah.
And then the kids and the parents that are willing to go the extra mile and do a little bit more have that opportunity to play for another month or two and extend the season, but not in a way that eliminates all the kids from doing that. And we do that in a lot of sports. Like we have a rec basketball program here, but the challenge that I see with basketball is that the travel season starts before the rec season. So the only kids that know how to play travel basketball, the only kids are the kids that play travel or rec the year before. So all those kids that may be really interested in doing travel don't start. So it's like, but we would have to get every league or every local town we play with to just totally flip their schedule, because it's not like isolated to one small town. And so, but again, in an ideal world, I'd say, okay, we're going to do rec basketball for 2 months, 2.5 months, and then we're going to have a travel season after the rec season, and then we'll play baseball, because then the parents and the families that need a break or want to go skiing or want to do these other things have that opportunity to do that. To me, that would be like ideally if we could get every sport to follow a similar rec, and then a beyond rec season for the people that want more, but not the whole season, not the whole year, just segment things. So kids, especially before age 10 or 12, like year-round stuff before age 10 or 12, to me is just they're not having the opportunity to sample.
Yeah. Those are great points. That is a cool difference between baseball and basketball programs, because you're right. It starts from a level playing field of we're all going to play this same season. If you want more than that, you can go beyond that. But it also proves the concept of some meritocracy, which is also another value taught into through sports, is like, if you're better at this, you'll enjoy it more, but you'll also have other opportunities with it. And if you're not, well, that's okay. You just might have got the playing time. And that's a natural sorting mechanism that I think makes a lot of sense for kids and makes a ton of sense for us for adults. But having lived through the youth basketball one, having played rec and travel ball through school and seen my siblings do the same, yeah, it is a whole different thing. And if you get in that program, now you're a year ahead of the kid that just plays rec ball. And that gap just widens and widens and widens. And you don't really have much of a chance to close that gap if you're not on the inside of the travel teams. And that's a resource and commitment level that's really tough for a lot of people to commit to. And so that's a bummer.
Right. And I think that, I look at like, when I say travel is rec travel, not like, is like local league travel. You as a whole, or AAU, or for-profit travel, year-round competition, that's a whole different. So when I'm talking rec and I'm talking travel, I'm talking community-based rec and travel, not the elite, year-round high financial commitment that I think is overtaking some of youth sports and really hurting, the potential of our youth sports programs and the potential benefit, because again, there's the resources that are committed to it, but it also pulls kids out of those programs that would otherwise be supporting and sustaining, building a foundational program. And I've seen the ripple effect of that over decades now, where basketball was the worst, or in my experience was the worst, because it was the more formal, the most established AAU year-round program. And I think soccer is probably the other one that has been really well established. And now you're seeing it happen with baseball and more sports, where it used to be baseball was just this season, and now it's baseball is year round. That didn't used to be that way 20 years ago.
Well, you used a critical word a moment ago, sampling. And have you ever read the book Range? Are you familiar with that at all?
I haven't actually, no.
I'm trying to remember the name of the author. I'll pull it up while I'm over here. Range came out, I want to say it was like maybe 2014, something along those lines. I'm going to screw that date up. I'm quite confident. Oh, it says 2019. That feels too late. Anyway, most people were familiar with the concept, like Malcolm Gladwell promoted the 10,000 hour rule, that in order to get really good at something, you need 10,000 hours of practice. And Range came out a number of years later, not countering that, just saying, yeah, that's true in select cases, but that's not the most common way people become excellent at things. And what the whole book is about how the value of sampling and then selecting what you enjoy is where you actually unlock the vast majority of people's talents. Like, there are people like Tiger Woods and Michael Phelps, and there are people that were golfing since they were 3, or Messi signed at a contract at 6, or whatever the age was. Like, those things are real. But what's more normal? What does the rest of the upper quartile of performance, high performers, look like? And so it used, for example, the data set of EPL, European Premier League soccer players, and said, what's the average age of an EPL player's commitment to soccer as a sport? Not when did Messi start, but like, when does most people at this level start? And I want to say it was like 15 or 16 years old. And what they found is the vast majority of people who are excellent at soccer tried every sport for a long time. And it wasn't until their mid to late teens that they said, soccer's the sport for me. That's when they started playing year round, because athletics tends to transfer across disciplines, but being like athletic in multiple ways and then selecting the one you're passionate about, that seems to be a more commonly successful recipe for good performance physically and in competition than maybe the Tiger Mom style, practice 4 hours a day, you're going to be great at golf or whatever.
Yeah, I think that those examples, I think people point to those examples, the extremes of the Tiger Woods or the Messis or whatever, and they look at those as like case studies and individual, because they're really easy to, when it works out great, right? But what you don't see is the wake of all the ruined athletes. Nobody talks about the ruined athletes.
Yeah, man, burned out ones that don't want to, they played all the AAU ball through high school and they don't want to play college because they don't even enjoy it anymore. They forgot that it's fun to compete.
Yeah, and I have a lot of so I would say anecdotal stuff. So my wife was actually a really great swimmer, age group swimmer. She got a scholarship swim at UMaine, and I remember talking to her in college. She was kind of burnt out, but she had a scholarship, so she kind of kept doing it. And she enjoyed the team and she enjoyed it, but I don't think she enjoyed the swimming the same way that she did as a youth. And she's a big runner now, won't touch a pool. You know what I mean? And she loves running and she runs every day. And I feel like, our goal for my goal when I think about my kids and the kids that are in our programs is, I want the kids that are in our programs to still want to play basketball or hockey or baseball when they're 35, 40. I want them to be lifelong athletes and pursue that passion for as long as they're physically able to. And I just, that long range of, and when I think of skill too, skill develops not over a practice or a season, it develops over a decade of doing the thing. And as you said, a lot of it's transferable. The most sport fields are rectangle, and time and space is a factor in every one of them. There's not a lot of circle fields.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, it tends to be very transferable. That tends to be true in professional skills as well. We're talking about it through athletics, but that book also brought up this example from West Point, and it shared this quote. I'm obviously going to butcher it because I haven't read it in a long time, but the quote was something along the lines of this general who runs West Point and looks at the data and says, it seems like all we're really good at West Point is ensuring that the people who graduate from West Point only serve for one cycle of contract. Because that's the data that he saw. They go through West Point, they perform at this level, and they absolutely do not re-up to re-enroll or re-enlist in the military. Why is that? Well, they dug in and found they prescribe people in MOS a job, and that's your job. That's it. Go get great at that job. But when they introduce sampling, like you talked about, hey, every year for your first 4 years or 6 years, if you come out of West Point, you're going to do a different job. And after each, you're going to have a coach who interviews you, who helps you figure out what you liked and didn't like. And after 6 years, you get to pick, or you at least get to weigh in on, these are the jobs that I am passionate about and the ones that would keep me here in the military instead of washing out. And they saw just a massive increase in reenlistment when they went to this model. And it just makes a ton of sense. Life is really varied. We know this in corporations too, right? If someone just climbs one direction forever, we're probably missing out on the things they could contribute through cross-functional participation. I'm sure you've seen that in the talent development side of the business you run as well.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think I tend to hire people that have I think it's more like we hire people that have a very varied background. I look for people that I hire for talent, not for necessarily skill. So I'm always looking for, um, what are the things that I can teach somebody? Like we can teach them lots of things, but there are things that are just people are built with and that make them better for certain jobs. And so, like, what is that? What is that skill? And so, what do I really need to hire for from a skill standpoint? And um, and from not from a skill, from a talent standpoint. And then what are the skills I need to teach that person, which are very different things.
I love that approach. Can you say more about like what would be some examples of talents you would hire for, and what would be some examples of skills you can teach as an institution?
Like learning Microsoft Excel or QuickBooks and those types of things. Those are all things that can be taught. Um, you know, Teaching somebody to find a detail or an error. Like there are people that are very detail oriented. You're either built to find those errors or mistakes, or you're not. Like and so, or you're built to be a listener. You're built to be compassionate, right? You can't teach those types of things. So if I'm thinking of like a child care worker, like I can't teach you patience.
I can't teach you to enjoy being patient with a bunch of newborns around you or 2-year-olds around you. That's a great point. How do you interview for that? Like, how do you, the typical interview structure societally and in corporations revolves around asking people for examples of times they've lived through situations as an indicator that they'll be able to do that again in the future.
Yes.
Does that model carry over for interviewing for talent, or is there a different way you approach trying to break that out? Pull out.
No, that's exactly, yeah. Motivational interviewing, the exact techniques. But again, it's like the things that I'm trying to hone in on are things that I think are really important aspects of the job versus asking your generic. Again, I'm less worried about the skills. Like if you're applying for a job, like you have to have So I spend a little bit of time asking about the skills that are required to do some of the jobs, and then do you have the ability to learn those skills? I think I have a concept on education, right? If you went to college, you've proven you have the ability to learn, So if you have to learn some things for this job, you've shown me you can do that. So let me, so I ask people to tell me about like the best day of work ever, why it was so great. And like, I want to understand who they are as a person and what drives them for success. So yeah, I really try to focus a lot on, the just moments and the stories that they can tell me, and what are the non-teachable skill, or not the talents that were part of that moment. Like what makes that
puts a lot of pressure on you as an organization to know what talents you really need to be present for that particular job or function. And again, that's not intuitive. You've got it figured out pretty well, it sounds like, and maybe that's built in and baked into the club, and you've been there for a while, and that's part of it. But like, how do you help the whole organization get good at identifying which talents are necessary for particular jobs?
I would say that's something that we're working on. I think that's something that it's understanding that is really important. We there's a great assessment by Gallup, the skills finder, and so that it'll identify your talents basically. And I think I try to teach as many of my staff about that as possible, and understanding the different skills and talents and the differences. I think I try to sit in a lot of the interviews, especially for the newer managers, and try to help them understand like the things that I'm looking for. We are developing some trainings around this as well. So I do think that making the right hires is like critically important. And we don't always get it right, but when you make the wrong hire, it's you own that for a while. So better to get it right at the beginning. So yeah,
well, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say I'm still working on how to fully articulate the process, but I think that just being in tune with the types of questions we're asking, making sure that everything is open ended. That's not, you can't get out of the answer with a yes or no answer or a very simple response. And just helping them frame the questions. I asked to see the interview questions ahead of time. I actually never go by the questions on the paper. I always kind of freewheel it because I'm listening to what they're telling me and trying to dig deeper into whatever the answer was. To kind of vet it out.
What have you found to be some of the more powerful interview questions? What are some of the pathways that you find to be gold mines for assessing talent and stories and those things?
Yeah, so like my favorite is when I ask people to tell me about the best and worst day of work that they've ever had, or in their current role. I think that's very telling about what that personal why is, what they're driven by, what they look forward to. Like, are they a good organizational fit? So those two questions to me are like, those are my bread and butter, because I really want to understand you as a person, and that can tell me a lot about you as a person. Other ones that are kind of my go-to. I love to ask off the wall questions just to kind of catch people off guard, or really jump on something and really make them explain it. So if they give me like a very surface level answer, like, dig a little deeper to see if I can, get a little more out of them.
Can you remember any of the good off the wall questions? Because there's a lot of value psychologically. There's this concept of novelty, that if you introduce novelty in a dialogue, you disrupt the flow, and there you kind of unlock a different way that people participate in a conversation. What are some good novel questions that you've liked?
Man, I have to, it's so I'm such a freewheeler. It has to be almost in the moment. I'm really bad at remembering the questions I asked. I'm really good at remembering the responses that people gave me. And I'll give you an example. So I had a person that applied to be an aquatic director, and they literally had aquatics is tough. If you're familiar with the Boys and Girls Go Wild world, like, aquatics professionals are tough to find, and it's only getting harder. But this was about 10 years ago, and we were desperate. And the HR director came to me with a person who recently graduated from one of the local colleges with some recreation management background. Nothing on their resume that said anything about aquatics. And I said, why are we even interviewing this person? They have no aquatic skills or experiences. And she's like, well, maybe they forgot to put it on the resume. And I said, you're the HR person, and you're telling me we're going to interview somebody who forgot to put. So I was like, this makes no sense. But I was like, okay, I'll play your game. Let's sit down. And the first interview question I asked was about, tell me about your aquatics background. Like, I don't have any. I was like, oh, okay, but you applied to be the aquatics director. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, I just, have this management background from just graduated degree. I'm willing to learn. I was like, okay, well, let's ask. I'll ask you a few more questions. And I don't remember what the question where this came up, but she told me that she was in the equestrian. She was helping a horse out, and she got kicked in the face by a horse, and that she didn't miss any classes and never fell behind on her assignments, even though but she had a metal plate in her face and surgery. And she showed me the pictures, and I was like, that's crazy, And what I learned in that moment, I was like, this is a person who's going to figure out anything they need to figure out to overcome whatever they need to overcome. And so I left, and I remember the conversation. I talked to the HR director. I was like, there's no way we can hire her to be the aquatic director, but I'm going to find a job for this person.
Yeah, that's a resourceful, gritty person who you can have a high degree of confidence you're going to push through.
You cannot teach grit. You can, like, there are so many things in that one answer. Like, you cannot teach any of these things. I need to find a home for that person. So I brought her on as I called her up and I said, I actually don't have a job for you. I want to hire you. I would like to offer you an internship working within our camp program. I have a very small stipend that I can offer you, but it will build some experience, and I will eventually find a role for you. But, like, come work for me. And she still works for me today. And that's over 7 years later, or maybe 8.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Interviewing is such a challenging thing. So I ran a sales organization for about a decade. So I interviewed, I couldn't tell you how many, in the hundreds of salespeople over my time there. And prior to that, I'd owned a painting franchise. I hired college students to paint homes, and hired hundreds of them to be painters or run franchises. I've done a lot of interviewing over the years, and it is really difficult to consistently ask the same questions to different people, because the stories are just so different, and I need to poke and prod to get to the root of what drives you. Like, to your point, I don't know how else you would have gotten into the horse kick to the face proving grit story. There's no recipe that guarantees you give a person the opportunity to explain to you how they had to do that. I suppose you could ask, tell me about a really difficult time in your life and how you overcame it. But to get a person to really channel the right vein of thinking usually requires more context than that. I find that you kind of have to build a little arena for them to play in so that they know what stories are appropriate or which ones are rapid recall for them quickly. How have you approached it?
You have to get them comfortable too. So I think that initial kind of, this is an interview, but it's more of a conversation type of, and actually some of the best interview, one of my others. So that person, she's actually one of our senior directors now. And she had moved up through the organization. Another one, our other senior director, it wasn't even a job interview. I was interviewing her to maybe join a board committee. And we were talking about stuff, and I was like so philosophically aligned with, I was like, I have this job open. If you want to get more involved, do you want to switch this to a job interview? And so we did it on the spot. I was like, I'll get your application later, but let's talk more about this job that I have available.
Yeah, I agree. You don't always know where it's going to go. And, so when I ran a sales organization, I could only hire for one thing, right? I needed salespeople to sell into this particular space. Now that I run a couple businesses, it's really interesting when you meet people that have just incredible experience or incredible skills or talents that you need, but maybe isn't even what you're talking to them about. Making that transition over to hey, hold on, time out. Let's change context. This is now a job interview because I think you might be really good at that. Can be difficult, but good for you for keeping your head on a swivel to find those types of people.
Yeah. So my first job out of college was actually radio ad sales. And the way that I got that job, it's crazy. I was student supervising of this career fair, and I was just walking around. I wasn't even there looking for a job. And this radio exec gave me his card and said, hey, if you ever want to come down to the station, just check it out. Let me know. And I was like, oh, cool. Radio station. It might be fun to go check out the radio station. So I emailed the guy later that day, and he's like, oh yeah, come on down. And I just remember he walked in, and we walked around the station. We talked a little bit, and then we went to his office, and he pulled this ultimate power move I've never seen before. He's like, here's a piece of paper. I want you to write down how much you want to make next year. I'm going to offer you a job. And I was like, I had I was not prepared for this. I had no idea. I was like, what's too big? What's too small? It was an impossible question for me to answer. I think I probably lowballed I don't know, 25K. I don't know. But the moral of the story is I asked him, I was like, why did you offer me the job? I don't understand. Wasn't even interviewing, wasn't interested in the sales job. And he said, I gave you my card and you followed up. That's the number one skill I need of my salespeople. I was like, oh, okay. And you weren't afraid to have a conversation with me. I was like, oh, all right. So I understand. That was kind of my introduction to understanding. Okay, there are certain things that just people innately do.
Yeah.
And all right, now what does that mean for this job? I was actually a terrible radio ad sales person, but not because I learned later that sales is not really about, I'm good at sales. You have to believe in the product you're selling. So anybody can be good at sales if you truly believe in the product you're selling. The one thing I sold really well, there was we created something, and I sold that very well because I believed in it. So now it's I look at my job today. Every job is sales to some level. What I'm selling is very different. I'm selling a recreation, youth, wellness experience that I truly believe in, and so it's very easy to sell.
Yeah, it's really hard to sell something you don't believe in. It's really difficult to overcome an objection or to give enough of a care to ask good open-ended questions when you don't think you have a solution for it. I ran a painting franchise through college and learned that I was studying to be a teacher. I should be teaching math, chemistry, and physics if I used my degree. but I ran a business in college and it just turned me on to entrepreneurship and business and sales and leadership, all those things. And when I got out of college, I didn't want to run that business anymore. And so I figured I would go into selling. I'd gotten some advice from some mentors of mine. They said, go get 5 years of sales experience. You'll either unlock a skill you'll use for the rest of your life, or you'll find a career that'll make you plenty of money and you'll have a great life with it. Like either way, it's going to be good for you. Go do professional selling for 5 years. And I was 21. I didn't know what you could sell. I didn't know what the things were, right? So it was advertising, cars, and like retail were the three ideas that I had. But somehow or another, I ended up at this insurance agency and we sold mortgage insurance. You know, when you buy a house and they mail you.
Oh yeah, I had it.
Like they mail you a ton of letters that say you could, insure your home in case you pass, it's paid off for your kids. Like those companies is who I went to work for. And I don't even remember the name of the company right now, but it was a terrible, terrible experience. Like it wasn't good business. It wasn't good. Didn't like it. And I would go sit across from these homeowners, not knowing a damn thing about financial planning or wealth management, but knowing that these people can barely afford the home they're in, let alone the insurance I'm trying to hawk at them. And if I say these words, they will buy. Like the script was so good. It was so effective. Literally all we had to do, show up, say the script at scale, and it worked and we made good money. But I was only there for like a year, but I just hated the feeling I had walking into that homeowner's home, knowing that there's other problems this person has, that if I were more qualified, I could help them solve. But I can't because I'm not. And I was only there for a year, and then I ended up jumping to a different company that armed me with Series 6 and 63, and I was able to solve more problems, right? But like it was so difficult to show up to those homes, even if I knew it would make me money, but I didn't believe in what we were doing, and I thought it was the wrong way to do it. That was terrible. But it was motivating to go find something I was passionate about, and it sounds like you had a similar experience. So you went from, nope, it's not radio. Like what was the next hop in your career?
When I was in college, I was a grad assistant in campus recreation. So I actually thought I was going to go, well, I got a PE degree. So I thought I was going to be a PE teacher. That didn't really pan out because there wasn't a lot of PE job openings when I was graduating. Now there's tons. So I went into radio ad sales after graduate school as more of didn't really know what to do with life at that point in time. And then when I think I had this epiphany after about 6 months. I went to the sales manager and I said, I'm really not making you enough money, and this isn't what I'm cut out for. Would you mind if I started substitute teaching? Because I want to get into the schools to start making some connections during the day, and then I'll still do radio ad sales the days that I'm not substitute teaching and in my afternoons. And I'll just go commission based, so that way you're not investing like a base salary into me, because I started with a base salary plus commission, and then after a year you're supposed to like be on your own kind of thing. And he's like, that sounds fair. He's like, I still think you have potential, but if you really want to go do this other thing, I'll support you in it. He was very friendly. He was a good guy. So he's like, so I was substitute teaching, and then I just started applying to random jobs that were in recreation, and I don't even remember the like what my specific thing were, but I had a relationship that my wife, we were together, and I didn't really want to leave the area, but I was applying all over the place, and I got a call from the director of campus recreation at Assumption College. She called me up and said, and this must have been November, maybe October. And she said, hey, I saw your resume come through. We'd love to offer you the job. And I said, okay, when are you looking for somebody to start? And she said, January 1st. I was like, oh man, I was really looking for something that started more in the May area when my wife was going to finish school, or my girlfriend, but now my wife. So I bet on her. And she hung up the phone. And then my former boss called me up and said, hey, Ann just called you and said she wanted to offer you an interview, and you said no. What are you doing? And he said some explicit words. I was like, oh man, you're right. What am I doing? And he's like, and I was like, what should I do? You're going to call her back and beg her for the chance to come down for an interview. Don't mess this up. I gave you a glowing recommendation before she even called you. So I called her up, begged, I said, sorry, I just, I'm a young man. I'm not really thinking clearly. Just please give me a shot to come down and interview. She did, hit it off. She offered me the job, so I went and did campus recreation for about 5 years at Assumption College, and that was a great experience. But it's like one of those things that, like, the people, your mentors, the people that look out for you, that stop you from making really bad choices and decisions.
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative that my boss, dad, at the time, he called me up, or former boss called me up and gave me a kick in the butt to kind of get me back on the right track professionally.
That's awesome that you had that relationship, and you were receptive to the swift ass kicking from somebody that you trusted and respected, and that they would do that for you. But it also took a lot of courage for you to call her back and say, kind of fall on the sword and be like, that was dumb, I did the wrong thing, can I have a second?
I've always been a quick if I'm a quick recognition of failure kind of guy, so that's how you learn. And I don't always get things right the first time. I think that's part of it's fail fast, fail cheap philosophy. But yeah, as long as you learn from it. And so I haven't turned down a job interview since. So that was good.
Well, it actually steers in the direction of one thing I did want to ask you about is, I've always thought about and my impression of nonprofits like the Y and Boys and Girls Club has been that they tend to be skill development transitory roles for an enormous number of people who are trying to figure out what they want to do in their career. And there's a small percentage of people who decide they want to stick with the mission, and they're married to the missionality of youth sports or youth impact in their community, or they maybe they climb the ladder, or maybe they're very happy in their career at whatever level. But the vast majority of people who work for these organizations don't work for them for very long. And the primary function of that time there is skill development. It's building the resume, it's learning and growing and failing positively forward with an impact. A lot of people sacrifice a higher paying job because they know if they're going to learn, they'd rather learn somewhere where they're doing something they enjoy and having an impact on youth or the community. How do you see, now that you're kind of at that senior level and have been for a while, how do you see your role and responsibility for talent development for your transitory workforce?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, like, I look at for myself or any of the managers, my job is to grow the person out of the job, and if they stay, great. Like, so, I think Henry Ford had a quote that was, "You can either train the employees that you have and they leave, or you can not and they stay." And you don't want that either. So, but I look at, like, every like, my number one goal, purpose, mission is to invest into the people that work for me and us, so that they grow and develop over time. It does sting a little bit when they move on, but being one of the challenges in nonprofit is, like, we don't, at the end of the year we have zero-based budgets, so we don't necessarily, if somebody wanted a big raise, it's not extra money kicking around in the budget to keep somebody or retain somebody. The budget is the budget for the most part, and that kind of stings, because there are people that we've lost over the years that we would have liked to have retained, because of they can make more money working in a for-profit business that has profit. So when I think of that role of leadership, and number one, it's people choose to work here. So we talk a little bit in nonprofits, time, talent, treasure. So we have people that make our mission possible because they invest a lot of their own resources into, through philanthropy, into our mission. But the time and talent, like, I look at our staff, they're making a huge investment, and treasure, because for what they could be making at a for-profit business, every day they make a donation into our business by what they could be making someplace else. And so, being very appreciative of the fact that we know that the staff could be making more, and I would love to pay them more. Like, one of my goals in life is to work at is to get us to a point where we could be the best paying nonprofit, so that we can compete with the for-profits.
Yeah.
But that would take, it's just going to take a lot to build our endowment to a point where we can do that. And then, it's one of those things that we wrestle with. We are here to serve the community. I remember having this conversation years, and we've done a lot with employee compensation to try to improve the gap, I would say. But I said, it never feels good when we have a mission to support youth and families, and we have all this financial assistance and scholarships, and we're doing that for all these people in the community. But if we're putting our staff in that exact same position where they need these resources, that it's like, that's, to me, it's always been a conflict. And so, but the reality is the money that we have is the money we have. And so operating the business within those means is one of the challenges of leadership. I don't even know if that entirely answers the question, but
No, I
it's
think
just one of those things I wrestle with, you know what I mean?
yeah, that's the dynamic. I mean, it's got to be very challenging to acknowledge that one of your primary roles is to develop this talent and know that the vast majority of it isn't going to stay. And probably not even because they don't like the job.
Yeah,
Like
no, and a lot of people hear it all the time. They love it. And we actually have this term we call boomerangs, people that left and to
totally.
other organizations and they're like, the grass isn't greener. So they come back and it's like, you know what, maybe it is worth making $1 less to work at a place where I'm truly valued and appreciated and invested into. So we love boomerangs. And actually, we talked earlier about the world of aquatics and how it's hard to find like an aquatics staff. And I look at that as, part of the reason is because sometimes there are certain career ladders within Ys and Boys and Girls Clubs that people don't necessarily see as a career. So lifeguarding is a first job for a lot of people. So just like I think I would associate my first job was actually McDonald's. I never saw McDonald's as a career because that was my first job. So if I draw the parallel. I was a lifeguard. There's very few people that are like, this is my first job. This is going to be my career because of that sampling concept. So how do we, maybe we should be hiring more people without any aquatic experience and teaching them how to live in an aquatics world,
Sure.
so that they see it as a career versus it's just as, you're a lifeguard, now you have lifeguard, swim instructor, aquatic coordinator, aquatic director. But yeah, it's one of those things that I camp positions as well. There are people that love being. There's actually more people that love being camp people, I think, than aquatic people in the experience that I've had, just because of the camp. You wish it was summer camp year round if you're a camp person. So,
Totally.
so you get a few more career professionals in camping, but aquatics is tough.
Well, I also know a little bit about how difficult it is to allocate funds for internal development, grant funds or donor funds that have particular applications. You can't cross that over. It's not a general pool of budget. So it'd probably be very difficult to develop a program that says, all right, we need X dollars because over the next 5 years, we are going to invest in developing the program so that we could have a talent development program for aquatics. Like that's just a big lift. And be tough to get a donor who's that passionate about aquatics to be like, yeah, here's $100,000 to spin up the program, let alone pay the people and all of those things. So it's kind of tough from both ends, it seems like, in the nonprofit space.
Yeah, although I think about future world of aquatics, and there's lots of pools and lots of places that need lifeguards. And when I was down in Massachusetts, lifeguards were making $15 an hour. Now I think they're making close to 20. It's a high, so at some point, because of the supply and demand, aquatics jobs may be one of the top paying jobs in these types of environments because of supply and demand principle, which is, or people are going to shut down pools because pools are already a lot expensive to operate. So there's some kind of, I don't know what the future holds for the world of aquatics, but there's something that needs to change within the balance to make sure that we have sustainable pools in the future.
Yeah. It seems like that could come into play. And I don't know that raising wages for like the forcing function of increased wage for your aquatic staff wouldn't just lead to pools being shut down. That would be a real bummer. But I think about it now in my community, there are fewer pools today than there were when I was a kid here. And that's insane. Like that doesn't make any sense. The population has doubled. There should be more investment in that. And there just isn't. So it seems like maybe that particular aspect of athletics is quietly dying, slowing down. I don't know the right way to say it, but it doesn't seem like it's booming, right? There's more basketball courts. There's less pools and less people to keep the pools safe.
Yeah. I mean, the baseline cost for doing anything in aquatics is substantially more than getting on a basketball court, and the annual maintenance. And I spent a lot of time in the pump room because in operations, that's where stuff breaks. And those repairs are not inexpensive. So
that makes sense. Well, what are some of you've climbed the ladder with this club, and you've been in a lot of different roles. So you've kind of had to learn how to lead through multiple different layers along the way. And I'm curious if you've thought much about or could share with us Like, how have you had to grow in that journey at each of the levels that you've, climbed in your path to being the COO there?
Yeah. So I think, the initial thing that I needed to learn was humility and humbleness. As you grow in these, especially entry level, like the entry level management, and you have some success growing programs, it gets easy to get overconfident that you are the reason why that happens, and so that you can you're part of a team, so you don't want to be that. Again, I'll do a sport analogy. Um, Play pickup. You said you're basketball player, right? So nobody wants to play pickup basketball with the person who scores the most points and shoots the most shots. They want to be on somebody who understands how to move the ball and be a team player, right? So I think that understanding that, like, the first thing I needed to really understand as I moved up was that my success was really the success of the people that I worked with and for and around, and so that I had to invest into as much into them as they were only going to invest as much into the programs and my success as I invested into them. So I had to make sure that I was really, no matter how good my idea was, if nobody bought onto it, it wasn't going to be successful. So and I've had a lot of ideas that were not successful, not because they weren't good ideas. Well, maybe because they weren't good ideas, but again, if you do not have people that support that idea, it flops pretty quick. And I've seen some other leaders come at me, and that's one of the things I've learned is, I've had some ideas pitched to me by leaders that are just really bad ideas, and they don't want to listen to how bad the idea is, and you push through it and you waste a lot of time and energy making a really bad idea happen. And when that idea fails, you're the person who owns that failure too. So so I think knowing when to say yes to great ideas and no to good ideas was also one of those things that learning early on, kind of how to figure that out, and really, again, getting that buy-in and support of the people around you and the ones that had to do the work is critically important.
So, what's the playbook for generating buy-in? I hear your point. Couldn't agree more. What have you found to be successful as a tactic to get people to buy in and or dissent in a meaningful enough way that you're like, okay, actually, that is a terrible idea. I should no longer push this ball up the hill.
Yeah, so I think the biggest one for me is open communication, like having communication where people can openly disagree and dissent. So I would say that I have a pretty good relationship with the staff that I work with, where um, maybe a little too casual at times, where they feel like they can push back on me, and sometimes it can be uncomfortable. But creating that space where I'd rather have them tell me that they think my idea is absolute dog crap, and work through that with them, than have them jump on board with the idea just because I said it, and then work through it and be like, no, I actually thought it was a terrible idea at the start, and I didn't tell you how to make it better. So I think that right there is this space or opportunity or permission, maybe it's permission, that you can openly disagree with me. And there are times where, like, in leadership, you don't want to be openly disagreeing in front of a room full of people. So we have to sometimes learn over time, like, what the appropriate way to disagree with each other is, and, like, in the setting, like, if it's internal, that's totally fine. If we're working with a community partner, please don't make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about in front of a community partner, kind of thing. But we work through those conversations if they happen.
So, what does that sound like? Let's pretend I'm someone new and I'm coming to your organization. Maybe I'm new frontline staff. Maybe I'm new program director or someone a little bit higher up. Like, how do you tell somebody who doesn't know you, who hasn't been a part of that culture, who hasn't absorbed it osmotically? Maybe they come from a culture where that's absolutely not the case, right? Or maybe even they come from a culture where the COO says that and then bites people's heads off when they actually do disagree and don't get on board. Like, what have you had to learn about how to adapt that to someone that actually hears you and plays along?
Well, I think you have to first learn how to read people. So, like, I will often ask people if they look at, again, maybe almost awkward sometimes. It seems like you want to say something, so you just really permissive it and be like, no, I really want to hear your honest feedback. It's one of those things that, like, they have to have some level of trust in you. So I don't think they're going to do it unless they trust you. So I would say that somebody from the outside is not going to come in and automatically feel comfortable doing that. It's something that you build over time. And so, again, the staff that I work most closely with, most of them have been here 5 years or longer, and also, like, sometimes it's, we talked about that innate talent. sometimes I'm pretty good at hiring people that openly are comfortable disagreeing with me. So they have no problem being a dissenter, and they're comfortable owning that too. So I think I think maybe that is a talent that I'm attracted to hiring.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, it is literally, I think it's one of the characteristics we use to describe personalities, disagreeableness. And so it's a articulable, definable aspect of humanity that you're willing to disagree with someone, or you're too agreeable, and that can be very challenging to actually get an honest opinion out of somebody that's maybe too agreeable. So it could be that you index in the direction of, I want people who aren't afraid to nudge me in the ribs and say, that's dumb, knock it off.
Yeah, and if I'm being honest with myself, I kind of like conflict. Like, there's a part of me that enjoys that, like the competition of the battle of conflict, and I think it's that competitive sports background is like,
Yeah.
I don't mind battling something out, and even if I lose, I still enjoyed the battle, kind of thing. So like same thing, playing sports. Like sometimes being in a closely contested game and losing is way more fun than being in a blowout on a win side.
Well, heck yeah. I think most of us would prefer to play a close game nail biter that we won, but we want it to be a closer game than a blowout. Blowouts aren't that fun.
Right, but I would take a close game loss, and that like defeated feeling of losing that close one over the one where I felt like I feel bad for the other team because they just weren't the team. This was not set up in a fair way. There's that never should have happened. And I think the same way when I think about, again, these inter office disagreements or suggestions. It's like, yeah, like I want to know that I can get in a mental battle with you about this idea, and that we're both going to get better over time by having these types of battles and improve each other's skill set and ideation and ultimately usually there's some level of compromise that happens in the inner office things. It's like, yeah, you took my idea and what I thought was a good idea, you made it a great idea because you told me all the bad things, and now I've solved for that.
Yeah, that's a great point. You've really shared with me offline that you really enjoy acknowledging that you really need to treat people differently based on how they need to grow and develop, and that means you might treat people differently, and that fair and equal are not the same thing. At what point in your journey did you learn that? Where did you have to learn to recognize that you have to adapt yourself to your people, maybe not the other way around?
I don't, truthfully answer, I don't know. It's something that changed over time, and it's something that I've evolved. It's become very clear to me now. I think maybe maybe I did it unknowingly, and I've heard some staff say to me, maybe being accused of giving people preferential treatment and reflecting on that and being like, no, I'm not really giving them preferential treatment. I'm just I'm giving them what they need right now so they can be successful, and not trying to defend but it's more like they need something different. Like you are built to handle, X, and they're built to handle Z. So like I can't treat you the same, because if I did, you would be bored and they would be failing. And so, and that isn't always a satisfactory answer for people because they look around and they go, wait. But really, what I look at is like, again, I'm not trying to get them to where you're at. I'm trying to get them to where the best that they can be, and that isn't always the same thing. Like that, you were never going to get Derek Fisher to be Kobe Bryant, no matter how hard you tried. And both great basketball players, right? But they had different roles on the same team. And I'm a Celtics fan, so I should be using Laker analogies.
I was surprised you pulled the Laker card on that one.
I think Kobe Bryant is such an interesting leadership study. Him and Michael Jordan, and we think about like youth athletics and this quest for greatness and stuff like that. But I think like Kobe, MJ, there's these like really standout athletes that have these commonalities, but what you learn from them in leadership is this like insane amount of personal accountability that then translates to the people around them. So yeah, so Kobe's somebody like irrefutably is somebody that you can look at as like, that's a great leader by example and hard work and extreme, I would say extreme accountability.
Extreme accountability, absolutely. The stories of both of those guys, and that's an interesting case study on what we think leadership really is, because to some extent, being the person who's in the gym, putting in the work and not really taking you seriously unless you're also putting in the work is an example of leadership by setting the bar. And yet that culture that does not translate to the world we've been describing of adapting to the needs of the people around you so that they get better to the next level of theirs. I'm torn by this, right? Because one of the companies I own is a leadership development company. We talk a lot about what is leadership really? And there's so many standout cases, right? Whether you admire Elon Musk and multiple companies and performance there, or you admire Mamba, or you admire what Jordan did, or there's so many awesome examples of things that frankly don't translate in reality into how we, leading everyday organizations that are mission oriented or profit oriented, don't really port over very well. So what are some of the parts of those case studies that you find practically applicable? And what are some that we can acknowledge, man, it's awesome and it fit that arena, but it doesn't really fit in either nonprofit world or corporate America?
Well, and again, I think what's that role? So like as a player, I think, so as the coach, you can't come at it that way, but as the player, you can. So I think that's where, like, again, I think Phil Jackson was a player's coach, right? And so listen, so he understood his role was to make the dynamics work. So he wasn't trying to get Derek Fisher or Steve Kerr to be Kobe or Michael Jordan. He understood what their role was and how to get them to elevate to the best that they could be and put them in positions where they could be successful. But then he had these people that were on the team that were doing the work, that were setting the bar for everybody. So he knew he had to have that person on the team. But you can't have a full team full of that. That's not going to work, So understanding the different roles and the dynamics that play in that team. So I think that's like organizational leadership is understanding that there are different players. So I think you can. And I would say I have some of those people on my team that I'm constantly having the conversation of, yeah, they're not at your bar, but that's okay. Holding them to your level of accountability may only be setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to set the bar, but you can't set the bar for everybody. You can only set the bar for yourself.
I think that's a wise observation, that the lesson for MJ and Mamba's work ethic was that they weren't the coach. They weren't the boss. They weren't the leader who was telling people what to do. They were your peer if you were Derek Fisher, right? Or if you were Scottie Pippen or Dennis Rodman or whomever, right? It wasn't that the coach was saying you have to go do this, but the bar was being set by someone at the same level as you. And there were players that both Kobe and Jordan have talked about who they utterly dismissed. They didn't even try to invest in because they weren't willing to play at that same level. Those people were still really good NBA players and they had great careers and they contributed meaningfully, right? But the coach wasn't the one telling them to do it. So that lead by example as an authority figure doesn't tend to work very well. It doesn't translate very well if the coach is the one in the gym at 5 a.m. and demands you're there as well. It just doesn't have the same effect as if it's peer doing that.
Right. And at the same time, you can't be that coach that says be there at 5 a.m. if you're not there.
For sure. Yeah, right? That's never going to work.
So that's that. So I think as the coach, you could get there, but you're as the coach, and again, I think that's when I do annual goals with staff. A lot of times I don't want to set my staff's annual goals. I want them to set the goal. I want them to set their bar, and I want to help them refine it and make sure it's actually an actionable goal and stuff like that. So, when I meet with staff in annual reviews and say, what are your goals? And like, well, you haven't given me any. Well, I don't want to give you. I want them to be things that you want to go and achieve. So, what do you want?
Who's in a better position to set your goal than you? You know this better, and I want you to own it. Yeah, that's an interesting observation. So you learned about buy-in, right? You climbed that ladder. That you mentioned some humility that you had to learn in there, and that I need to get buy-in from these folks along the way and listen well. And then you climb the ladder again, man. What are some of the other leadership lessons you've really had to unpack as you've grown in your role?
I think in the most recent role, a lot of it comes down to now I'm talking with board members and community partners and understanding how to package the things that we're doing in a way that they understand. And these are people that are highly invested, and actually probably parallel to parents and club sport teams. They've invested time, resources, money, and they want to see a return on that investment in as far as programming goes. So it's understanding that sometimes we don't always meet the mark. So I think finding out how to deliver the message that we were looking for this outcome and we got this other one over here. Those are difficult conversations to have. but I think they're, very important. So again, it really comes down to the same things. It really comes down to knowing the people and building a rapport with them, so that when you have those conversations, it's you can separate the personal from the professional, and it's I'm just giving you data, and here's how we're going to fix it. So I think those are some of the conversations. I also am somebody who constantly wants to make everybody happy, which is sometimes a pitfall, because I get emails from upset parents, and I always want to, like, let's I'll go back and forth and try to find a resolution. Sometimes people just, there is no resolution; they just want to burn the world. And so that could be really challenging, or people only see one side of, like, I have a very global sense of what we have for resources and organization we can commit to, and people surface value, some of these things just don't make sense to people, but I am not in a position to give them the information where they would see the whole picture, because it's like either a conflict of interest, or it sets the staff up for future failure. Like, there's all these different things. It's like, I can agree with you to a point and then have a conversation. So yeah, I think those, like, knowing what information is information that can be shared, it should be shared, and what information needs to be held closer to the chest is something that I, like, definitely, again, I'm such an open, free person that I would love to, yeah, let's talk it all. Let's have that internal dialogue, conflict. But you're not on my team. So if you're coming out, I can't treat you the same way as somebody who's on my team. So learning that I got to treat you as opposition, and I can respect you as a foe. And so I'm going to treat you a little bit differently than the person I'm challenging on my own team. So I think that's, making that sport analogy.
Sure. That's a different degree of discernment, who to share what with, and how to think about which side they're on in the conversation. Are we on the same side of the table looking at a set of problems, or are we on the opposite side of the table? And that doesn't make you an enemy. It just is, we're on opposite sides of the table. we're negotiating, or you're a frustrated parent that I'm not going to have a solution for, but you deserve to be able to yell at me because something went wrong under my watch. Okay, that sucks, but that's reality. I suspect there are some painful lessons and ways in which those types of lessons are learned. But I think that's the only way you can learn that type of thing. I don't know how else you would get the wisdom to determine.
Yeah, no. Well, I think that through good mentors, I think that's, so a lot of times I'll be like, here's what I want. Here's how I want to respond to this, and they're like, no, don't do that. And so, you go through a few of those, and every once in a while you don't check with the person, and then you learn you should have, before you hit send on that email, or made that phone call, or, sent that letter. I don't know. And so it's, yeah, I think that's one of the things. Just know, so you can learn it, but I'm not that person who can learn it without making a few mistakes. I'm a very, I learn by doing. I can't read a book and be like, okay, I can now go do this thing. I can read a book and get some, but I'm going to make some mistakes, or I'm going to miss some of the key details, and I need to fail a few times in real life to pay attention to the pitfalls a little bit more.
Yeah, a lot of it is experiential, and like you just have to. Yes, mentors can help you, and that's really helpful. It'll get you a little ways down the road, but until you've sat there and had that parent yell at you, and you do feel the weight of it, or until you've had that piece of information that would change the context of the conversation, but I'm really not at liberty to share that. I don't know that there's much that most people can do to automatically be good at something like that because they read it in a book once or watched a video about it, right? It really has to be done a few times, not a lot, but a couple times before you really get it.
Yes. Yeah, no. It takes, you get a few stings, and then you're like, I'm not going to put my hand next to the bee's nest.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the opportunities maybe that AI is unpacking? Maybe in the short term, maybe in the near term, for your organization, or maybe nonprofits in general. I don't know if that's something that's really much on your radar, but thought I'd ask.
Yeah, it's just I have this weird relationship with AI. I feel like everybody wants to use it, and every time I get an email now, I'm like, did AI write that, or was that the way this person really felt about it? And in some ways, it's been very, very helpful. I mean, I remember there was one staff, I was like, please put every one of your emails through just do it. It's better for all of us, because the formatting was just so bad and nobody could really understand what they were saying. So I think, um, yeah, I think so, especially in this industry, in this world where people have to experience it. Like we're in a people business. There is no replacement for playing. Like we're not going to AI our way through playing basketball or swimming or exercising. Um, but there are, I think, it's like anything. There's tools that we can use to an advantage. Like I can use AI to write a practice plan, and um, I, but I should still have a baseline knowledge of, is that actually a good practice plan, or is that just, am I just trusting in, like, you know, so um, for people that maybe don't have a high skill set in the area, maybe it's better than them making up what they have on their own. But if you've gone to school and have a background in physical education, I would like to think that you can at least vet out what you're getting for information on AI. And I worry about a world where we just get so disconnected, or we stop doing all the work. So that's the biggest thing I worry about with staff, is like, if you start relying too much on AI and you stop challenging your brain to work in those ways, what happens to your critical thinking? And so then we are getting yelled at by a parent, and AI has generated every one of your emails for the past month. How are you going to find the words? And so you got to write some of your own emails.
Yeah, the fear of automation to the point where we lose touch with what we're really doing, and therefore no longer really weighing in, or using that discernment, or we feel like it no longer requires that background to do this job or something, I think is a potential risk for sure. I think there's good studies that show the atrophy of thinking if you're overly reliant on it. Are there any applications of it in the near future that you're excited about, or you see providing value for you and your team?
Well, I think in when AI is combined with technology, and we're actually looking at some. It's pricey, but there's some softwares out there. Actually, I don't think nothing in the U.S. right now, but I think of drowning prevention. So there are AI technologies that incorporate within like aquatic environments with the cameras that can do early detection of drowning, and could alert a lifeguard that there's potential drowning happening in and around the pool. So like that to me is like really exciting, and potentially, or even scanning a crowd at a basketball game and seeing if anybody in the crowd has heightened emotions, of aggression. And so could we then, have staff go near that person and, monitor the situation and prevent something from escalating that could potentially, so I think there are some applications when you incorporate a technology that is like early warning devices that could be potentially very exciting for like a recreation center and world. But I don't know if right now, I think as we've looked at it, some of those things aren't not yet available in the United States, and some of those things, cost is a major barrier to those things. So, but when you think about the drowning detection, like what's the cost of saving a life, right? So, is there a cost that's too high? I don't know, but I have a theory that insurance companies should fit the bill for this, because they're the ones who ultimately save the big money. So
Yeah.
if I'm going to invest in this, then maybe the insurance company could give me a huge break on my premium, because I'm that much more protected and less of a risk for you as a insurer.
Yeah,
Nobody
if you were
wants.
bringing product to market, that would be the partnership you'd be seeking, right? Is an understanding of how that insurance cost impact would be. And I would want to price my product in the sweet spot where it makes just enough sense that, of course we want to reduce our premiums by that much. So we're just going to make it a no-brainer there. Now they've got to get the technology to that point, and I can only imagine how complex that is. And that's an OpEx, or excuse me, that's a CapEx expenditure to update your pool with those monitors or sensors or whatever, I suspect. But still, that's a cool idea. That's really interesting. I hadn't even thought of, my brain is so people oriented. I hadn't even thought of the safety applications, but that's a really big risk for every club like yours, where that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and when you think, we talked about like those learning jobs, those jobs are typically held by that teenage staff. Like when you think about lifeguarding, and so these are staff that we are entrusting in these very high risk areas, and they're very well trained, and they go through the process, but they still have developing brains, and so the way they approach that situation is different than an adult, like a fully developed brain adult. Um, so that's the area when we think about risk. I think about the pools is the biggest area because people on a basketball court, they can sprain an ankle, break a leg, that kind of stuff. That there's areas where things can happen, but you know really hard to die on a basketball court other than like something that's bound to happen because of a cardiac event. But the few examples where youth lose a life in a pool or somebody loses a life in the pool, that's just tragic, and we need to be able to prevent those.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great potential application. Pat, I've really enjoyed the conversation with you. If somebody wanted to chat with you more or connect with the club, what's the best way for them to do that?
So our website, clubaycc.org, and my contact information's on there. Look me up on LinkedIn. We didn't talk about it at all, but I have a pond hockey tournament. There's a website there too, Maine Pond Hockey. Search there, you can find some contact information. So all those things. Yeah, it'd be a pleasure, especially if you want to get involved in helping make youth sports more accessible, and growing, and maybe changing some of the structure of youth sports to make it really. And actually, we didn't talk about it at all, but I should have hit on the fact that Norway's success in the most recent Olympics and their national sport model and how it's.
I saw that. You've got a few minutes. Share more about that. My wife shared that with me. I don't know what it was on Instagram that laid that out, kind of like the youth sports in Norway. Could you share a little bit about that with our last couple of minutes, maybe?
Yeah, so basically, I think it was the late '80s, early '90s. Norway adopted a countrywide sport model that basically broken down as like the joy of sport, and the basic principles are. It's really about fostering lifelong love and making sure that like they have incredibly higher levels of participation. So they do not have competitive games before age 12. They have early sampling, and it's all community based. There's no for-profit teams. So it really is the rising tide lifts all boats, and every kid and family really celebrates and participates in sports together. And so that was 40 years ago ish. And if you look at, they've always had really strong success in the winter events, Winter Olympics, on a total medal count, for a very small country, like less than 5 million people, I think, or right around 5 million people. But even in the Summer Olympics, if you look at per capita numbers, they far exceed, they're top of the medals in per capita for all the recent Olympics. And it really is, they have, in the United States, I think it's like 3/4 of kids stop playing sports by the time they turn age 12. And in Norway, I think it's 97% of kids participate in sports. It's such a stark competition, and just like anything, like the top of the pyramid can only be as big as the base of the pyramid. And so as you funnel those athletes up through you're going to have top talent emerge, and things that they've had that sampling, so they're going to emerge in something that they're talented or passionate about. And I think there are examples in almost every sport where they have they're standing out in things that you wouldn't expect. Like I think they won a medal in the Summer Olympics for beach volleyball, or like they placed really well. It's like Norway beach volleyball. Like, is there a beach in Norway? I don't know. I don't know much about Norway, and I'm gonna geographically mess myself up. But I mean, that's probably some sand. But it would be the thing that you think they'd be good at, right?
Yeah, and what a contrast to what we were talking about earlier, right? The availability of travel ball or paid travel ball or AAU, and just the way it starts to drive a wedge into access and competition and relative skill level at such a young age in my daughter's life right now, and in youth sports in general. Is that a national law? Is that how that took effect?
Yeah, it's I don't know if it's national law, but I think it's I would call it a national mandate, I think. And so they have a whole document, and it's probably been updated. Again, it's their sport philosophy for their country, and clearly it's having these profound results at the highest level of competition.
Here's to hoping they keep winning, so that model and the root cause of it is something that can be more easily discussed and implemented, because it would have a big difference. And you're right about that physical example of the height of the pyramid is a function of how broad the base is.
Yeah,
And if the base is narrow, it will never get very high.
yeah, I think one of the reasons, so like I would say the last few Olympics, I see more and more conversation around Norway's model because of the success. But a lot of the conversation again focuses on total medal count, and so people look at U.S. like we have such a big population, and sports is such. So again, there are athletes that emerge out of our system that are very talented. It's what are the ones that were left in the wake that had potential that never reached their full potential because they just got blown up by the system. And I don't think as much attention is paid to that as there should be. So I just, yeah, hopefully we can shed a little bit more light on that. And again, I think a few more Olympic cycles of Norway dominating the top of the medal count for a country of less than the population of New York City. You'd think you'd pay attention to that and it'd get more coverage than it currently does even.
Well, that's the way things are proved in sports. It is a meritocracy in that way. So if that keeps working, people are going to wonder how and why, and there will be more and more light shed on it. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate the conversation, and thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.